We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio American Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. On today's special edition, we're going to be talking about the Trump-Harris debate, how that went, who are the winners and losers, and what this means for the national election coming up in November. Remember, this show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news, analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. Welcome to Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio American Network. We're very fortunate to have with us to discuss the Trump-Harris presidential debate, possibly the only debate that they will do together. And that's Liberty Nation's senior political analyst, Mr. Tim Donner, who also happens to be the longtime host of this here radio show. Tim, thanks ever so much for being here.
Always a pleasure, Mark.
Now, let's get the first things out of the way first. Let's keep this in order. What were your overall impressions of the Kamala Harris-Donald Trump debate in Philadelphia?
Well, I think that the nation was sort of lulled into a false sense of security by the CNN debate, which was handled really very objectively by CNN, surprisingly. So I think the expectation was we were going to get the same thing in the ABC debate between Trump and Harris. And of course, we didn't. It's very hard to operate in a 3-on-1 environment. I look at it like anybody who's played basketball, played a pickup game. Let's say there's a big, tall guy on one side and 3 smaller people on the other. If they play 3-on-1 in basketball, the one guy can hit the long shot every once in a while, but he's still going to be pestered and peppered by the 3 people he has to defend. So it's really like that with the debate. There were so many opportunities for the anchors to fact check Kamala Harris on top of fact checking Donald Trump. I think what you have to do as an anchor is you have to either fact check both or fact check neither. You can't fact check one and let the other statements go unremarked upon. So, for example, when Harris talked about Project 2025, well, first of all, nobody knows what it is except it's a big, scary boogeyman. Okay, Trump has said he hasn't even read it, but the anchors didn't challenge her on that. When she said that Donald Trump said he'd be a dictator on day one, as if he said that seriously, that went unremarked upon. When he talked about Charlottesville again, which never seems to go away, even though the entire thing has been perverted into something that it wasn't. And maybe the biggest whopper of all was when she said that Donald Trump says he will terminate the Constitution. I mean, you can't get away with saying something like that if anchors are really in a position to force both candidates to clarify. So it was 3-on-1. Harris did very well. No question. She did about as well as she could, I think. I'm not sure she can exceed that performance because she managed to work within her 3-on-1 advantage very effectively. Where I differ with a lot of the analysis is that Donald Trump had a terrible night. He kept taking the bait, they say. Well, what is he supposed to do when he is accused of wanting to impose Project 2025 in the whole country? What's he supposed to do if the anchors aren't going to say, excuse me, Madam Vice President, but he's never said that. But of course they didn't. So he had to fact check her. So, excuse me, what people saw as taking the bait, I saw as Trump necessarily defending himself against these withering attacks. She was able to position herself as being moderate, respecting the military, says she won't ban fracking. when she looked like she was really digging deep to say that one, because 12 years, like Donald Trump said, 12 years she was against fracking. Now suddenly she's not. So she's flipped all these positions and wasn't held to account for it. So I will say one more thing before I stop rambling, Mark, which is that I was very curious that after the debate where the Harris team and most of the media, of course, said that she had won the debate decisively, that they were out looking for a second debate. Now, ordinarily, the candidate who lost the debate is the one who wants a second debate. And especially if you're Kamala Harris, where there was so much pressure on this first debate and she passed the test. So why would she want a second debate?
It's right.
It strikes me that that's because their internal polling shows that they're still not in the position that they need to be in to win.
I think that's a really important point. I'd like to discuss that briefly. So yeah, as soon as the event ended, the campaign team, Harris campaign team, came out saying, "Yeah, we want a second debate." Now, this strikes me as something which has actually gone largely unremarked upon. But while Kamala Harris' team was doing that, and Kamala went to an after-debate party full of supporters where she spoke briefly to supporters, Donald Trump went straight into the spin room at the debate, where it was surrogates for both his campaign and for the Harris campaign and all the media. And in the spin room there after these things, that's where people get their opinions across about this is how it happened, this is how that happened, and this is how it should be looked upon. And then the media takes that and they feed it out.
Right.
And Trump went in there, which is, I think that's never really happened before. He just
No, I don't think so.
He walks in and he says, "Oh, I think that was the best debate I've ever done." And he starts taking questions and managing the spin himself.
Yes.
He's asked, Kamala's calling for a second debate. And he echoed these comments on Sean Hannity on Fox later in the evening. But he said, when a prize fighter loses, the first thing they do is they ask for a rematch.
Right.
That makes me think that although obviously I'd say that most people think that Kamala won that purely because there were some very low expectations and she exceeded those expectations. She did exceed them. There were word salads or things. But she didn't land a knockout blow. And so what that means is that she's now got to compete with Donald Trump in the media. And we'll talk about the media a lot later. But she has to compete on a field where she's going to have to do interviews. She's going to have to take impromptu questions, which she has not done yet. But if she can get into a debate format, then maybe she can strike gold twice. And she might be able to put off all of that campaigning that Donald Trump's out there doing. I think that might be why she asked for a second debate. But you're absolutely right. It's usually the defeated one that asks for a second debate because they need a second chance. And that probably does tell us quite a bit about the mindset of the Harris campaign in the wake of the debate. And we're going to discuss that as soon as we get back after this short break.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.